I had a friend a number of years ago who's a scholar. He had a fascinating experience early in his career as an academic. And this friend of mine got a cryptic card, an invitation to an address that he didn't recognize. And he asked one of his colleagues about it. And all they said is, you need to go. And that sounds a little bit sketchy at first because you're wondering, you're going to this cryptic address in some unknown part of town. It sounds like it's a recipe for disaster. And yet he trusted his colleague and he went. He went into this place, and it sounds like something right out of a movie where it was a lightly or hardly furnished room with a desk and an individual sitting behind it. They welcomed him, they greeted him, offered him a beverage, and explained to him that they'd been following his work. They were interested in what he's doing, and they wanted to help fund it. No strings attached. They just wanted to help remove financial barriers for him to pour himself into his life's work, which is what he did for the next 3 decades. And he produced some incredible books. I'm not going to give the name of this individual right now, but you have probably seen some of his books. And if you haven't seen or read his books, you have heard or even spoken some of the phrases that he coined in his books. And while he probably was going to be a great scholar regardless, this investment in him, this kind of patronage in him with no strings attached, absolutely amplified his ability to conduct that research and to get that literature written and those books written and out into the world and in the hands of people to bless them and benefit them. As a student of history, there's one aspect of generosity that has always been fascinating to me, and it's the concept of patronage. I think this has some real value for us to consider as we're thinking about our lives of generosity as well, whether you're a person with significant resources or maybe fewer resources, but you want to use them to generously benefit and impact others. And I don't think we can talk about patronage without going to the most famous example in history, but I'm going to hold off on that for just a second. Patronage, as I'm thinking about it, I jotted down a quick definition. Just writing a check directly to a person instead of writing it to a charity or an institution. And you're doing it because you believe in what they're doing, or you want to help them do more of what they're doing. You want to help them grow. Maybe you see potential and you want to water that small plant so that it can grow and blossom, and the beauty of that plant can be witnessed by others and others can benefit from it. That's the general idea of patronage. Now, in the real world, we know that there's another angle to patronage as well. We know that oftentimes it's not just about generosity, but we'll get to that in a moment as well. As I think about history in the Western world, a lot of the music and the art and even the research and the scholarship before the modern era was made possible by investments or support from the church or maybe the king or a certain ruler, but also by private individuals who saw the potential in another person and they invested in them. The Medici family were obviously among the most famous in history. For over 500 years, the story of the Medici family and their investment in people like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo and Botticelli. We see some pretty amazing examples. And do we think that had they not invested in those individuals, would we experience the benefit of their art and their work today? Well, maybe so. Maybe someone else would have come forward. Maybe they would have found their way and their art would have gained more attention regardless of this investment. But I'm not so sure. I think that it's possible that the investment of these other individuals is part of what helped fan into flame the gifts that were already there and helped the gifts get out to the world and be recognized and appreciated in beautiful places like going to the Sistine Chapel and seeing the frescoes on the ceiling and the Last Judgment, the startling imagery on the front of the Sistine Chapel. I just wonder if some of the great artists and musicians in the history of the world would have gotten that shot, would have gotten that opportunity if they hadn't had some form of patronage to help them at some point along the way. Now, of course, these people who were providing this kind of patronage oftentimes did have ulterior motives. They were doing it to improve their reputation, to have greater influence with certain people. They had other kinds of motivations. The reality is, in the world of generosity, sometimes we do have ulterior motives and we don't even recognize them about ourselves. But I don't think that's the whole picture. I think it's fair to say that there are many examples throughout history of individuals who had resources and they use those to directly support another person to help them get their art and their music and their scholarship accomplished and out into the world. And the world is blessed and benefited from that. Even with those motivations, Michelangelo became Michelangelo inside of the house of the Medici family. And while there maybe was some manipulation and other things like that, there are also some masterpieces that came from it. But what if we ask ourselves, what becomes possible when someone gives like that with no agenda attached? What would happen if you had a certain amount of money and you saw someone with potential and you liked their ideas, you saw the kinds of gifts that they brought to the world, and you wanted to be able to remove barriers for them to just invest themselves fully in that one thing that they love and they're good at, and to be able to grow and improve in it over time, over multiple years. And that at its core is the simple idea of patronage. And while from a tax perspective, it's a little bit different. When you give to a nonprofit charity, you can deduct that, you have a financial benefit. In patronage, it oftentimes doesn't work that way. If you're writing a check directly to a person, that's not tax deductible in the same way. Although I'm not giving any legal advice, just to make that clear in all of my videos. And also, the person receiving the money, if that is a personal gift, my understanding, and again, do not trust this as legal advice, check it out for yourself, check with accountants or other people. But if someone is giving you a gift, I think there's something like up to a $15 million level in a lifetime that you can receive in gifts without having to pay taxes for it. And I believe there's a certain amount that you can receive annually. Maybe it's $15,000 or $20,000, somewhere around there. I think it's close to 20, just under $20,000 that you may not have to report, but then if it goes over that, you have to report it to the IRS. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to pay taxes on it, but it does count toward this lifetime maximum that you can receive. I mean, $15 million is a lot of money, and people can make that kind of generous investment in another individual, and that can completely transform their ability to grow, to learn, to develop and refine their skills, and they use those skills to create things for others. So I guess here's the punchline of the video. As you're thinking about embracing a life of generosity, have you noticed people in the world who have great potential, or they're already starting to do good work, and you could provide some resources that could put fuel on that fire, that could amplify it, that could allow them to focus their practice and their work in such a way that it could grow and expand more significantly. At the core, that's the power of patronage. And I think it's a worthy aspect of our giving portfolio today for those of us who are trying to explore what it's like to embrace a life of generosity, to take what's been given to us, whether in small or large amounts, and to use it in a way to advance missions that matter in the world.